The Cleveland Browns just dropped an official depth chart, and there is one single detail buried on that piece of paper that has an entire fan base losing their minds right now. And honestly, once you see it, you will understand exactly why. The Browns listed Deshaun Watson's name above Shedeur Sanders at the quarterback position. That is it. 2 names, 1 order, and the reaction from Cleveland fans has been nothing short of explosive. But here is where this story gets genuinely interesting, because when you stack that depth chart against the actual practice numbers that have been tracked across multiple weeks of camp, something does not add up. The guy listed second is outperforming the guy listed first by a margin that should not be this easy to ignore, and the organization knows it. So the question sitting at the center of all of this is simple but uncomfortable. Is this just standard NFL paperwork, or is something else happening inside that building in Cleveland? We are going to go through everything today: the stats, the contract, the theory that fans are whispering about, all of it. Before we get into it, drop one word or one emoji in the comments right now that describes how you feel about Cleveland's quarterback situation. Just one. Let's see what the Gridiron Ground community is actually thinking. Before moving further, we're pushing for 1,000 subscribers here at Gridiron Ground. If you're enjoying our Browns and Shedeur Sanders coverage, hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey. Let's build this community together. A single piece of paper should not have this much power over a fan base. But when you understand the full context of what Cleveland has put its fans through at the quarterback position over the past decade, it starts to make a lot more sense why something as routine as a published depth chart can feel like a declaration of war. Here is what the Browns officially submitted. At the quarterback position, the chart reads Deshaun Watson or Shedeur Sanders. Watson first, Sanders second. That is the official organizational document that went out publicly representing where this team stands entering the final stretch of training camp. Now, for a casual observer, that might seem like a nothing story. Veteran listed ahead of rookie. Move on. But for anyone who has been tracking this camp closely, who has been watching the practice reports come out day after day, who has seen the numbers build up across weeks of repetitions, that name order is not a small thing. It is a signal, and whether it is an intentional signal or just thoughtless organizational habit is exactly what we are going to dig into today. Let's establish the foundation first, because the depth chart does not exist in a vacuum. Deshaun Watson signed a fully guaranteed contract worth $230 million with the Cleveland Browns back in 2022. $230 million, fully guaranteed. That means no matter what happens on the field, no matter how many interceptions he throws in practice, no matter how many times a younger quarterback outplays him in every measurable way, the Browns are paying that money regardless. It is already gone. It has been committed. And that financial reality shapes every single football decision this organization makes, whether they admit it openly or not. Shedeur Sanders came into this situation as the 5th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. His arrival was always going to create a complicated dynamic inside that quarterback room because you are asking an organization to openly compete a young first-round pick against a veteran they gave a fully guaranteed fortune to, and then somehow remain objective about which guy actually gives them the best chance to win football games. That is a nearly impossible position to be in as a front office, and the way they handle it publicly, the language they choose, the order of names on a depth chart, all of it becomes magnified because of that impossible position. What makes this particular depth chart moment hit differently is the timing of it. This did not drop before camp started when Watson had the benefit of the doubt simply because he was the returning starter. This dropped after multiple weeks of practice tracking that have told a remarkably consistent story about who is performing better when the pads come on,
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
And the reps start accumulating. The tracker numbers across the first full stretch of camp have Shedeur completing throws at a strong rate, with a touchdown to interception ratio that would make any coaching staff feel comfortable. Watson's numbers, by contrast, have shown a troubling pattern of turnovers that would raise serious questions about any quarterback, let alone one carrying that kind of contract weight into what the Browns are hoping is a competitive season. And yet the name on top of that official document is still Watson. You can make the argument, and some people are making it, that this is just how NFL depth charts work. Veterans get listed first. Contracts get respected on paper even when the tape tells a different story. It happens around the league, and most of the time nobody writes 3 paragraphs about it. But Cleveland is not most places. This is a franchise that has churned through quarterbacks at a rate that is almost historically remarkable. A franchise that has given its fan base real reason to distrust the decisions being made at the top of the building when it comes to this particular position. So when that fan base sees Watson's name above Sanders on a freshly printed depth chart after weeks of camp numbers pointing in the other direction, the alarm bells do not just ring, they are deafening. This is Gridiron Ground, and we do not let stories like this slide without pulling every layer back. If you are new here and you found this video through the algorithm, or a share from somebody who knew you needed to see this, hit that subscribe button right now, because we are tracking this Cleveland quarterback situation every single day until we get a real answer. Now let's get into the numbers that are making that depth chart look increasingly difficult to defend. Statistics from NFL training camp practices are genuinely imperfect. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either selling you something or has never actually watched how these tracking operations work on the ground. Different reporters count different plays. Some include scripted screens in their completion totals. Some count drops against the quarterback, and some do not. Some separate skeleton drills from full team periods, and some lump everything into one number. All of that is real, and it deserves to be said up front before we get into what those numbers actually show, because the caveats matter. But here is the thing about caveats. They explain away individual data points. They do not explain away a consistent pattern that holds up across every version of the tracker from every outlet covering this camp. And that pattern has been remarkably stable. Across the first full week of Cleveland's training camp, Shedeur Sanders is tracking at approximately 156 completions on 222 attempts.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Completion percentage is solid. The touchdown to interception split sitting at roughly 12 touchdowns against 4 interceptions across that stretch is the kind of ratio that tells you a quarterback is making good decisions, taking what the defense gives him, and not trying to force throws into coverage that is not there. Deshaun Watson, over that same stretch, is working with more overall repetitions, which matters for context. More reps means more opportunities to accumulate both positive and negative numbers. But even accounting for that, Watson's interception total across camp has been climbing in a way that would be concerning for a backup fighting for a roster spot, let alone a guy carrying the organizational commitment that Watson carries. 8 interceptions tracked over that period against a touchdown total that does not justify that turnover rate is not a statistical blip. It is a pattern. Dillon Gabriel has been the third name in this conversation, but his numbers reflect what you would expect from a developmental arm getting limited looks. Around 68 completions on 106 attempts, with 5 touchdowns against 5 interceptions. The inconsistency in Gabriel's day-to-day performance is actually consistent in its own way. Some days he looks like a guy who could develop into something. Other days, the numbers reflect exactly why he is not part of the real competition at the top of this depth chart. Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Tanner Morgan have received such limited action that their sample sizes barely register as meaningful data. They are in the room, but they are not in the conversation. So when you strip it down to the two names that actually matter for this discussion, the picture that emerges across multiple weeks of accumulated tracking data is clear. Shedeur is protecting the football at a significantly better rate than Watson. Shedeur is generating touchdowns at a ratio that reflects smart, disciplined quarterback play. Watson is generating turnovers at a rate that, in a regular season context, would have the fan base calling for a change before the bye week. Now here is where the single practice numbers become important as a piece of the larger puzzle rather than the whole story. On the most recent practice day tracked before this conversation started, Shedeur finished 17 for 25 with 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Watson went 20 for 29 with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Some people looked at Shedeur's 0 touchdown day and immediately reached for the sabotage narrative. But a 0 touchdown, 0 interception practice day is not necessarily a bad day. A quarterback who completes 17 of 25 attempts without turning the ball over once is a quarterback who is making correct decisions under pressure. He is not gambling. He is not forcing the ball into tight windows to manufacture highlights. That is disciplined football. The problem is that disciplined football does not always generate the kind of statistical line that looks impressive on a surface-level read. And in a competition where perception matters almost as much as reality, a 0 touchdown day can get weaponized into a narrative even when the underlying performance was sound. The numbers tell one story. The depth chart is telling another, and that gap between those two things is where this entire debate lies. There is a concept in economics called the sunk cost fallacy. The basic idea is simple. Once money has been spent and cannot be recovered, rational decision-making should stop factoring that money into future choices. What is gone is gone. The only question that should matter going forward is what decision produces the best outcome from this point forward, not what decision justifies the money that was.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
Already committed. NFL front offices understand this concept in theory. In practice, it is one of the hardest psychological traps in professional sports to escape. Because the people sitting in those front office chairs are human beings with egos, with reputations, and with a very real need to not look publicly like they made a catastrophic mistake. The Browns gave Deshaun Watson $230 million fully guaranteed. Fully guaranteed means that number does not shrink based on performance. It does not disappear if Watson throws 40 interceptions. The money is owed. It has been committed. And the people who made that decision are still working in that building. Now imagine you are sitting in that building today. You have a young first-round pick who has spent weeks of training camp outperforming your $230 million investment by almost every measurable standard available to you. And you have to decide, publicly and officially, how to handle that situation. Starting Shedeur Sanders over Deshaun Watson would be the clearest possible public admission that the Watson contract was a mistake of historic proportions. Not just a bad signing, not just a player who underperformed expectations. A $230 million error that now has the organization starting a rookie over the man they bet the entire franchise on just a few years ago. That is an extraordinarily difficult public position for any front office to put itself in willingly. The organizational ego required to absorb that kind of public narrative is genuinely rare. And history tells us that most franchises in that situation will find reasons, sometimes legitimate and sometimes manufactured, to delay the inevitable for as long as they possibly can. This is not a Cleveland-specific problem. This is a human problem that happens to be playing out in Cleveland, with an unusually large dollar figure attached to it. Teams around the league have made this mistake before. They have stuck with expensive veterans past the point where the tape justified it because the alternative required too much public humility from the people who made the original decision. The difference here is that the gap between what Watson is producing and what Sanders is producing appears to be wide enough that the usual cover stories are getting harder to maintain. You can only say the competition is open for so long before the actual game tape.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
From preseason starts making that position look absurd. And this is where the organizational pressure becomes genuinely fascinating to watch from the outside, because the Browns are caught between two extremely difficult options. Option one is you play Watson, protect the narrative around the contract for as long as possible, and hope he somehow finds a version of himself that justifies the decision. Option two is you play Shedeur, absorb the inevitable wave of stories about what the Watson contract means for the franchise's long-term cap situation, and try to rebuild around the young quarterback, who is currently outperforming everyone in that room. Neither option is comfortable. Neither option is without serious organizational consequences, and the depth chart listing Watson first is the clearest possible signal that right now, today, this organization has not yet found the internal resolve to move toward option two. Here at Gridiron Ground, we have been covering the NFL long enough to recognize what this kind of organizational hesitation looks like when it starts showing up in the details. The language choices, the depth chart ordering, the way coaches frame competition questions in press conferences. These are not random. They are symptoms of a front office that has not yet made a decision it knows eventually has to be made. Subscribe to Gridiron Ground right now if you want to be in this conversation every single day as it develops, because we are not going anywhere and neither is this story. Let's address the theory directly because it is out there, and it is getting louder, and pretending it does not exist is not honest journalism. Some corners of the Cleveland fan base and some pockets of NFL social media have started floating the idea that the Browns organization might actually prefer to lose football games this season rather than let Shedeur Sanders play well enough to win. The logic behind this theory goes something like this. The Browns currently hold a pick position that, depending on how badly they perform, could land them a top 3 or even top overall selection in the 2026 NFL Draft. And the 2026 quarterback class has a name attached to it that generates a level of excitement that very few prospects in recent memory have generated. That name is Arch Manning. Arch Manning is Peyton Manning's nephew. He is currently at Texas, and the speculation around his NFL potential has been building for years at this point. Reports suggest, and fans have been speculating widely, that if Arch Manning declares for the 2026 draft, he will be one of the most heavily recruited prospects the league has seen in a generation. Now here is the thing about this theory. It needs to be stated clearly and without ambiguity that there is no confirmed evidence that the Cleveland Browns organization is deliberately trying to lose football games. That is a serious accusation. It carries significant implications, not just reputationally, but potentially in terms of how the league views the integrity of what is happening in that building. And making that claim as a fact without proof is irresponsible regardless of how frustrated a fan base is. What can be said, fairly and accurately, is that the Browns are in a draft position right now that would become significantly more valuable if their 2025 season goes poorly, and that the presence of a generational quarterback prospect in the 2026 class creates a financial and competitive incentive that any front office in that position would be at least aware of, even if they would never publicly acknowledge it. The reason this theory has gotten traction is not because fans have inside information proving intentional tanking. The reason it has gotten traction is because the alternative explanations for why Watson is being listed above Sanders, despite the camp tracker numbers have started to feel increasingly insufficient. When the simplest explanation for something does not hold up under scrutiny, people start looking for other explanations. And in Cleveland specifically, a franchise with a quarterback history that reads like a cautionary tale for the entire league, the trust required to believe the simplest explanation has simply not been earned. Rumors are circulating and have been circulating across multiple platforms that conversations within the organization about the 2026 draft class began earlier than anyone publicly acknowledged. None of that is confirmed. None of it should be treated as established fact. But the volume of people asking the question has reached a point where dismissing it entirely without engaging with the logic behind it feels like its own form of dishonesty. What we can say with confidence is this: if the Browns play Watson heavily through the preseason and into the regular season, despite clear evidence that Sanders gives them a better chance to win, and then finish the season with a top 5 pick, the tanking conversation will not be a whisper anymore. It will be the loudest story in the NFL. And if Sanders is the one who plays, and plays well, and Cleveland somehow finds a way to be competitive in games they were not supposed to be competitive in, then the tanking theory evaporates on its own, and we have a completely different and far more exciting story to tell about a young quarterback taking the reins of a franchise that desperately needed someone to grab them. Right now, we are in the space between those two possible futures, and the depth chart, the contract situation, and the camp tracker numbers are all pointing toward a decision point that this organization cannot avoid much longer. The preseason opener against the Bears is going to tell us more about which future we are heading toward than any depth chart ever could. Before the depth chart conversation goes any further, it is worth taking a step back and explaining how these documents actually get produced inside NFL organizations, because most fans have never thought about the machinery behind them, and that context genuinely matters for how you interpret what you are looking at. The official depth chart that a team releases publicly is almost never written by the head coach sitting at his desk and arranging names in the order of his personal confidence. In most organizations, the official depth chart that goes out to the public is compiled and formatted by the Public Relations and Communications Department based on roster status, contract seniority, and sometimes nothing more intentional than alphabetical convention or jersey number habits that nobody in the building thinks twice about. The coaching staff does have input in what that chart reflects in broad terms. They are not completely removed from the process, but the specific ordering of names within a position group, particularly when the official language includes the word or between two names as Cleveland's depth chart does, is not always the precise coded message that outside observers read it as. Around the league, it is genuinely common to see a veteran player listed above a high-performing younger player simply because of tenure, contract status, or the team's desire to show public respect for what that veteran has contributed previously. This happens in quarterback rooms. It happens at wide receiver. It happens on the offensive line. It is not automatically evidence of anything beyond organizational convention. The New England Patriots under Bill Belichick were famous for releasing depth charts that bore almost no resemblance to who was actually going to be playing. Belichick treated the official depth chart as a competitive information tool, sometimes listing players in deliberately misleading positions to prevent opposing teams from learning anything meaningful about his actual plans. Other coaches around the league have done similar things for similar reasons. This is not to say that Cleveland's depth chart is meaningless or that fans are wrong to pay attention to it. Optics matter in professional sports, and they matter a lot. The way an organization presents itself publicly shapes the perception of players, of fans, and of the market around the team. Listing Watson above Sanders is a choice, even if it is a low-friction choice made by someone in a communications office rather than a calculated declaration from the head coach. What it does mean is that you should not treat the depth chart as definitive proof of a coaching decision that has not actually been formally announced. The real decisions in NFL organizations happen in meeting rooms and on practice fields, and in film sessions where nobody from the outside has access. The depth chart is a public-facing document that reflects some fraction of those internal realities filtered through organizational habit and public relations calculation. The honest read on Cleveland's depth chart right now is that it tells you Watson still holds the official senior position in the room by the organization's own public accounting. It does not tell you that the coaching staff has made a final, irreversible decision to start Watson in Week 1. It does not tell you that Shedeur's chances are over or that the competition is rigged. It tells you that, as of the moment that document was produced, the organization was not yet ready to make a public statement that reversed the veteran's official standing. That gap between official standing and actual performance is the tension that is driving this entire conversation. And the only document that is going to resolve that tension in any meaningful way is not a depth chart. It is the snap count report from Saturday's preseason game against Chicago. Watch who gets the first series with the starting group. Watch how many drives each quarterback runs. Watch who is still out there in the second half when the games within the game start telling you what the coaches actually value when something real is on the line. That information is worth 10 depth charts, and everyone inside that building knows it. There is a specific kind of language that NFL coaches use when they have already made a decision, but are not ready to announce it publicly yet. It tends to involve a lot of references to process, to competition being ongoing, to everyone needing to continue earning their opportunity. It is careful language, measured language, language specifically designed to avoid saying anything definitive while technically not lying. And then there is a different kind of language that surfaces when a competition is genuinely unresolved, and the coaching staff legitimately does not know how it is going to end yet. That language sounds similar on the surface, but it carries a different energy. There is less management in it. There is more genuine uncertainty underneath the words. Offensive coordinator Tommy Rees has been publicly on record saying that Shedeur Sanders is very much still in the running for the starting quarterback job in Cleveland. Those words, or words very close to them, have come out of that coaching staff multiple times during camp. And the question worth sitting with is which category those words belong in. Here is why it matters. If Rees is simply managing the locker room and the fan base while the organization quietly prepares Watson to start Week 1 regardless of what the numbers say, then the public statements are a form of organizational messaging designed to keep the peace and avoid the inevitable Watson contract conversation for as long as possible. That is a real possibility, and it would be naive to dismiss it. But if Rees genuinely means what he is saying, if this competition is as unresolved internally as his words suggest on the surface, then what you are seeing is a coaching staff that has been genuinely moved by what Shedeur has shown in camp and is wrestling with the very real tension between the football decision and the business decision that the Watson contract creates. Both of those readings are plausible. Neither one can be confirmed from the outside with certainty. And anyone telling you they know for absolute certain which one it is has more confidence in their information than the situation actually warrants. What can be evaluated is the pattern of the comments over time. Coaches who have already made a quiet internal decision tend to gradually shift their public language as the season approaches. The mentions of the younger player as a real competitor start to decrease. The framing of the veteran's position starts to harden. The language moves from open competition to earned opportunity to this is our guy without ever announcing a formal decision. That language shift has not happened yet in Cleveland. Rees and the coaching staff have continued to reference the competition as alive heading into the preseason opener. That does not prove the competition is real, but it does create an additional data point that sits alongside the camp tracker numbers and the depth chart and the contract situation and all the other pieces of this story. The most cynical read of the coordinator's comments is that they are buying time and managing expectations before an inevitable Watson announcement that has already been decided at the ownership and front office level. The most optimistic read is that the coaching staff is genuinely uncertain, and that Saturday's game is going to carry real weight in resolving that uncertainty one way or another. Shedeur Sanders himself has handled the public side of this situation in exactly the way you would want a young quarterback to handle it. He has talked about focusing on what he can control. He has talked about the competition being the coach's decision to make, not his. He has not fed the narrative or given anyone ammunition to say he is distracted by the organizational politics surrounding him. That kind of composure, at 22 years old, inside a situation this complicated, with this much public noise around it, is itself a data point. The quarterback who stays locked in when everything outside is chaotic is often the quarterback who eventually wins the job. Whether the Browns let that process play out the way it should is the question that remains unanswered. Saturday's preseason opener against the Chicago Bears is not a regular preseason game in any meaningful sense of the word. Under normal circumstances, a Week 1 preseason game is an opportunity to evaluate roster bubble players, to get young guys their first live looks against outside competition, and to shake off the rust of a camp that has been entirely controlled and scripted. This is not that situation. This preseason opener carries the weight of a decision that the Cleveland Browns organization has been delaying for weeks. And everything that happens with the quarterback position on Saturday is going to be read, analyzed, dissected, and argued about in ways that a typical August game against the Bears would never generate. The single most important thing to watch is not who throws the first pass. It is not who throws a touchdown or who gets sacked. The single most important data point coming out of Saturday's game is the snap count and series distribution between Watson and Sanders. In NFL preseason games, particularly the opener, the way a coaching staff sequences its quarterbacks is one of the clearest visible signals of internal hierarchy that ever becomes publicly available. If Watson opens the game with the first team offense and runs 3 or 4 full series before Sanders gets his first look, that tells you something real about where this organization's head is at. If the series are split relatively evenly from the opening drive, that tells you something different. If Sanders comes in earlier than expected and gets meaningful reps with players who are going to make the roster, that tells you something different again. Watch the specific groupings around each quarterback. Who are the receivers running routes when Watson is in? Who are they when Shedeur is in? If the Browns are running their best available skill position players with Watson and giving Shedeur the second and third string guys to work with, that packaging tells you the story even if the coaches refuse to tell it in words. Watch the play calling around each quarterback too. Are they calling a full offense for Shedeur, or are they running him through a limited package that does not actually test what he can do in a real game setting? Limited packaging in a preseason opener for a quarterback who supposedly has a legitimate shot at the starting job is one of the quieter ways an organization can subtly shade the results of a competition without ever announcing publicly that the competition is over. If you are thinking about fantasy implications for the upcoming season, Saturday is your first real information. Preseason performance does not always translate directly to regular season starter decisions, but preseason snap counts and series distribution almost always do. Coaches do not waste first-team reps in live game environments on quarterbacks they have already moved past internally. There is another element to Saturday that extends beyond just the quarterback competition. The Bears are going to game plan their preseason accordingly, and the level of resistance each quarterback faces will not be identical. But the way each guy handles the transition from controlled practice environment to live game speed against a defense that is not trying to help them look good is genuinely valuable information regardless of the opponent. Shedeur Sanders in practice has shown the efficiency and decision-making discipline that the tracker numbers reflect. The question that preseason actually answers is whether that efficiency holds up when the pass rush is real, when the coverage rotations are not familiar, and when there is no script protecting him from the chaos that defines actual NFL football. Every single snap from Saturday is a piece of evidence, and at Gridiron Ground, we are going to be breaking down every relevant snap from that game with the kind of detail that the depth chart conversation deserves but has not yet received. This is why you subscribe to Gridiron Ground right now, not just for today's video, for the breakdown that is coming after Saturday, because that game is going to generate more real information about Cleveland's quarterback future than this entire training camp debate combined, and you are going to want to be here for it. Hit subscribe, turn the notifications on. We will be ready. To understand why a depth chart listing two names in a particular order can set off a reaction this loud and this emotional, you have to understand the history. Because the Cleveland Browns quarterback story is not just a recent problem. It is not just a Watson problem or a depth chart problem or a training camp problem. It is a decades-long accumulation of broken promises, misplaced trust, and organizational decisions that have repeatedly failed the people who invest the most in this franchise. Since returning to the league in 1999, the Cleveland Browns have started over 30 different quarterbacks. 30. In a league where sustainable success is almost entirely dependent on finding and developing a franchise quarterback, Cleveland has churned through more starters than almost any organization in the modern era. Tim Couch, Kelly Holcomb, Jeff Garcia, Charlie Fry, Derek Anderson, Brady Quinn, Colt McCoy, Brandon Whedon, Jason Campbell, Brian Hoyer twice, Johnny Manziel, Josh McCown, Robert Griffin III, Deshaun Kaiser, Baker Mayfield, Case Keenum, and now Deshaun Watson with a $230 million price tag attached to the latest installment of the same story. Each of those quarterbacks arrived with some version of hope attached to them. Some arrived with massive hype. Mayfield was a #1 overall pick who genuinely looked for a stretch like he might be the answer. Watson arrived with the kind of financial commitment that signals absolute certainty from a front office about what they believe they are getting. And each time, the story ended with that same combination of frustration, wasted draft capital, and a fan base that had to start the waiting process over again. That history is the context that makes the depth chart reaction make sense. It is not an overreaction to a minor organizational document. It is the reaction of a fan base that has been through this exact movie so many times that they have learned to read the small signals, because the big announcements have let them down so many times. When you have watched your organization prioritize the wrong quarterback so many times, you start paying attention to the name order on depth charts. You start analyzing every word a coordinator says in a press conference. You start tracking practice numbers and looking for patterns because you have been given no reason to trust that the people making the decisions are going to make the right one when it matters. That is not irrational. That is the learned behavior of a fan base that has been burned repeatedly by exactly the kind of organizational inertia and sunk cost thinking that is potentially playing out in front of them right now. And Shedeur Sanders arriving in Cleveland in 2025 feels different to that fan base in a specific way. His father, Dillon Sanders, is a cultural figure who extends well beyond football. Shedeur's own journey through college football generated a level of personal investment from fans that is not typical for a 5th overall pick. People want him to succeed not just because of football, but because of what he represents as a young quarterback who has handled significant pressure at every level with remarkable composure. So when the organization lists Watson's name above his on an official document after weeks of camp numbers pointing in Shedeur's direction, it does not just feel like a football decision. It feels like a familiar betrayal from an organization that has made fans feel exactly this way so many times before. The Browns have a real opportunity in front of them right now. Not just to win football games, though that would obviously be welcome. The opportunity to do something they have genuinely struggled to do across an entire generation of trying. Make the right decision at the quarterback position when the evidence in front of them is clear, even when that decision is organizationally uncomfortable and financially humbling. Whether they take that opportunity or find another way to delay the inevitable is going to define this franchise's next chapter. And the depth chart that dropped this week is the first visible sign of which direction they are leaning. The camp tracker numbers consistently favor Shedeur Sanders. The touchdown to interception ratio, the completion efficiency, the decision-making under pressure across weeks of accumulated repetitions. The statistical evidence points in one direction and has pointed there with remarkable consistency. The depth chart points in a different direction, and the $230 million fully guaranteed contract sitting behind that depth chart explains most of why. The tanking theory circulating among fans is unverified speculation, but it does not come from nowhere. It comes from a fan base that has learned through repeated disappointment to look for alternative explanations when the obvious ones stop adding up. The preseason opener against the Bears is the next real moment of truth, not the depth chart, not the practice tracker, the live game snap counts, the series distribution, the play calls around each quarterback in a competitive environment. That is where the organizational posture becomes visible in a way that cannot be managed through a PDF. And Cleveland's history at the quarterback position is the reason none of this feels routine or low stakes to the people who care about this team. Every decision gets read through the lens of everything that came before it. That is the weight this franchise carries into every quarterback conversation it has. The Browns have a choice to make: football or finance, the right call or the comfortable one. Saturday gives us the first real look at which way they are leaning. At Gridiron Ground, we will be here for every second of it. Make sure you are too.